did you want to, yeah, did you kind of just want to start of like sort of how, yeah, how did you, uh, what kind of appealed you about Braver Angels, and what kind of made you, um, what attracted you to them in the first place?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've grown up in different parts of the country. I'm from a mixed political family. My dad's red, my mom's blue. But we all love and respect each other, and it's a great supportive family. And so I grew up with different ideas being talked about in the house. I grew up with the fact
Wow.
that like disagreement wasn't threatening, and that
Mm.
I could have my own opinions and they could be different, and I could defend them, and people would give me a hearing, and then I would listen to them. And so that's kind of how I grew up. Um, and I got involved in political campaigns when I was younger, and I've voted, and I stay as current as I can with politics. And as you know, as a lot of people know, it's getting a lot harder to be
You don't say.
right. So yeah, I mean, the polarization thing has hit me like it did everybody else. I mean, it's gotten so intense, and it's kind of an extreme version of team sports. People are like, you're on my side or you're the enemy or whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
it reminded me of the Byzantine Empire when they had I think the Greens versus the Reds, and they're always this unfortunately fatal clashes. I mean, thankfully, I
that's
guess
an
it hasn't
awesome
gotten to that
historical
point.
reference that I don't know, so I'll look
Oh,
that up.
okay. Sorry,
That's good.
in my spare time I watch Crash Course History. I'm sorry.
No, that's fantastic, man. I love it. Yeah, so I mean, this got in the last few years has gotten super duper intense. Like for everybody else. I mean, I watched what was going on social media, and I see my friends, and they're stressed out, and they're afraid and angry, and it feels like politics is this like explosion that's about ready to go off all the time, and people are
Yeah.
just huddling. And I ended up reading a book called The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt,
Yes.
and it talks about, you may be familiar with it. Yeah, it talks
Yeah.
about sort of what is driving like this level of separation, polarization, and all that. And it really appealed to me, and it gave me a perspective and helped me understand kind of what was going on. So I researched him, and through researching him, I found out about, at the time, Better Angels. So
Okay.
I got involved just locally. I helped host a couple workshops. I helped start a breakfast group, and we got together, and just to be in the same room, have people of different politics having breakfast was a little bit mind blowing. It just felt like at that time because it was so intense. Um, and yeah, and
Yeah, well, can you talk a little bit more about that? Like when you first sort of heard of even like the concept of Braver Angels, was a part of you
yeah,
like this can't be real, man? Like,
well, I think probably it really came to a head when I went to the first Red Blue workshop that I attended, because I was just sure it was going to be a shouting match.
mm,
I was sure that it was going to devolve into people basically stereotyping each other's ideas and attacking all these projections and the kind of stuff that I was seeing online. Um, and when I saw people being able to speak in an environment that other people were listening, and it was like I could see the courage in people, but I could also see the supportive system that was there, and actually hearing and understanding each other, examining stereotypes, um, listening respectfully, asking useful questions.
mm,
It was sort of like all the pressure went out of the tea kettle. It's sort of like I was like, this
yeah.
is still possible. Like, this is what I've been looking for, but I wasn't finding it in my online communities. And when I saw it, I was like, I want to be a part of this. So yeah, I've ended up. I trained as a debate chair, and I helped host really just the one debate locally, which was a climate change debate.
Right.
Before I got recruited to do basically the volunteer state coordinator gig, which is just really linking people together with resources and encouraging local groups to start, and helping be sort of an intermediary between them and national. Um, but I still work with debates. I actually help with the national debates sometimes, and I do debates in other parts of the country. So I did one just the other day in Atlanta. So I just being Zoom was awesome. I just came in and was the debate assistant, which we call the whip. And I just whipped this debate in Atlanta about a really tense issue. It was about abortion rights, and Brave Angels has this magic where you can have these tremendously intense issues that are personally affecting people, and have them come and tell their stories, these heartrending stories,
Mm.
and people will listen and people will hear with empathy. And just like any other thing, like those, at the end of those events, people are like smiling at each other. People are feeling like, compassion. They're grateful. They're expressing how they never get to have those kind of connections with people. So yeah, it continues to amaze me, and I love being part of it. It's
Wow.
kind of a long answer, so hopefully there's something in there that's useful.
No, that was wonderful. Can you for I don't know, for some people who may, that they're used to sort of political partisanship when it comes to, especially when it comes to um, social media, where it seems like it's just a shouting match, and you're trying to score points, as many points as you can with the sort of pithy put down,
Yeah.
um, and it becomes very much a nuance destroyer at times. Can you sort of just describe sort of, and you kind of did earlier, but describe in a little bit more in detail sort of the relief almost that you feel with being a part of something where people have voluntarily come to engage in civil civic dialogue without vilifying each other. I mean, it's unfortunate that seems like a novel concept these days, but it certainly does.
Yeah, sure. Happy to talk about that. So, and maybe kind of some background, kind of metaphorical stuff will help that. So the thing is that the kind of fights that we have politically are a lot like the kind of fights that people have in their personal relationships. And I
Mm,
hate that it's true, but the way that basically people can be so convinced that the other person's wrong and that they're right, and they kind of are holding, grievances from, you did this to me when kind of thing. And the kind of situations that tear families apart are kind of what are tearing us apart. And it's not a coincidence that Brave Angels methodology is based on marriage and family counseling. And the
mm,
idea is that, it doesn't matter. I mean, yeah, we definitely have different perspectives. Yes, you're both angry. Yes, you're both frustrated, but we have to live with each other. We can't kill each other. And like, we have to make a future for these kids. That's kind of the idea. Like, whatever future we're making, we have to make together. But at the moment, that tension, that fight seems like the only important thing. It seems like those differences, they 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 make it seem as though the other person is motivated only by evil intentions, right? The person is just out to get us. The reason they're doing this thing is because they're awful, and nothing that you can do can get through to them. It's just frustrating. Um, but in counseling, what they end up doing is you say, okay, fine, you're all going to get a chance to say what you have to say, and you have to listen. And there's sort of a neutral arbiter there that lets you do that. And when you get to say what's on your chest, when you get to actually express yourself, then
you're right.
and suddenly when you've done that, now you're able to hear the other person, right? So it's really, really hard to hear somebody else when you're defending yourself. If
Right.
I feel like you're coming at me with a sword, I'm going to just put up my shield and use my sword. There's no way I'm going to let my guard down. But if you let me express what it is that I have in my heart, particularly my personal perspective, what is so important to me and why, now I can hear you.
Mm,
And in a lot of ways, like, people both putting their weapon down and seeing the other person as a person and not just some monster coming at them, lets them realize that the stress that they were feeling was something they built up in their head.
right.
The monsters always seem bigger than when we confront them, right? So that's kind of what that feeling is. That feeling is, oh, this works. And more than just those moments, like in the workshops where we have like reds and blues in the same room, or like in a debate where you're somebody that's on one side of an issue and someone's on the other side of an issue, or in a one-on-one conversation like we're doing now, where you've got a different perspective than the other person, whether it's red blue, whether it's black white, whether it's urban rural, whatever it is. Beyond those points where we're actually exercising that feeling and exercising that ability, we do a lot of workshops that are there about teaching people the skills for doing this all the time, so
Mm,
that when you're at Thanksgiving dinner and Uncle Joe says something that just gets your, that gets your
right.
hair up, it it lets you pause and take a perspective where you see Uncle Joe for Uncle Joe, and not feel like that we have to react kind of from our amygdala. It's not like the fight or flight
Right.
thing wants to engage, and those are our only options. We don't have to flee. We don't have to fight. We can actually understand, be patient, let him talk himself out, try to actually know where it comes from, and maybe get to a place where we can have influence over them. And that's a big part of why I care about this. It's not just the personal kind of, wow, this is a relief. Like now I can walk into situations where someone is very different from me and not feel threatened. But I think stuff can get done this way. Like
Mm,
we can make real progress on issues if we're not just fighting all the time.
right.
Like we're all in this together, you know?
I wish my dogs believed that too. Sorry, let me put on
Yeah.
my headphones just to muffle them out here. Um, I, oh my
Yeah, no
goodness.
worries, man.
Yeah, excuse me. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Um, I- so yeah, I guess I just didn't wanted to stick with sort of that train
Yeah.
of thought was how the applicability of it outside of these events which people voluntarily come to, how you sort of uh, hope or are seeing it apply to when you sort of leave the confines, if you will, of braver angels. And I
Right.
mean, I thought that was a great metaphor with Uncle Joe and so forth at Thanksgiving. And obviously in our day-to-day life, we're going to um, we're going to encounter people who have different viewpoints, different opinions, who again, I mean, so many people are on social media and may or may not uh, be virtually accosted, I guess, by folks.
Mhm.
Yeah, how do you see this? Additionally, how do you see this sort of applying to the real world, so to speak?
Well, yeah, it does. It definitely applies in the real world. The workshops are not. I mean, they are kind of this artificial environment where there's a moderator, and everyone who's there is agreeing to to be listening and talking. And so, yeah, you could kind of say, well, yeah, maybe it works there. But the thing is that when you've done that and you've realized that you first of all you're realizing that, oh, this is safe, I can speak for myself. That ability for me not to have to represent a whole side, but really just to talk from my own experience, making I statements, talking about what it is that it seems to me, it's hugely liberating. Because a lot of the discussions that we have normally, they're these abstract things in which we end up as a part of a bigger discussion, where instead of I mean, our politics are all personal. They all come from our personal experience, right? And I can represent my own experience. And when I'm talking about my experience, there's nothing you can do to invalidate that. You
Mm,
know, I mean, I can send you some kind of theory and say, well, of course, this is a theory of politics. Well, of course, you can shoot that down, but you can't talk about my personal experience, lived experience, and being able to own that when you go forward, and know that the conflict that you experience when you're encountering someone else is really them bringing their experience, and having the respect for them, and the feeling that it doesn't diminish your, how do I say this? It doesn't threaten your position to encounter someone whose position is different, that
mm,
you can sit there and be comfortable with that. Having done that once, it's much easier to do that again. We don't tend to do these, we don't tend to do this online as much, because online is a medium that isn't geared to this. Online is it's a performative medium, right? If
mm,
you and I are having a discussion online, we're really having a loud shouting discussion in front of a lot of people. That's just the way it is.
right.
Whereas if we're having a one-on-one conversation, it's you and me as people. And the understanding the body language, you can tell whether I'm there to, whether I'm aggressive or whether I'm not, or whether I'm listening to you, I'm actually listening or not. Um, yeah, so it does definitely result in better conversations in the real world, not just political conversations. I mean, interpersonal conflict of all kinds. It's the same skills, active listening and speaking from your own perspective, being genuine, being vulnerable. I mean, these are not unique to what Braver Angels does. It just happens that we're applying them to a political context.
Right, right. So let me ask you this in terms of uh, personally, like, what do you think you've learned most? from your Braver Angels experience, what do you think you sort of how do you think you've grown? I'll say in with the experience of Braver Angels.
I think I make fewer assumptions.
Mhm.
I think I make fewer assumptions. I make fewer generalizations. I jump to conclusions a lot slower. I tend to follow up when someone says something. Well, what did you mean by that? In a way I didn't necessarily do before. I think I prejudge people less.
Mm.
I examine where I get information more, I guess is probably the best way to say it. Like I'm more careful about my sources of news. I don't just read my Facebook feed. I read, journals, and I read good magazines and publications from all across the spectrum. That's helped a lot. I think I'm patient. I'm more patient than I was.
Mm.
So yeah, I think all of that's been helpful. I'm just in general less stressed and less frustrated because at least I've got an outlet for a lot of it. I mean, things still come at me that confuse me in politics. There's things that frustrate me. There's political events that happen that I go, what in the hell is happening? But I have friends that are on opposite sides of politics. I have friends that are in other parts of the country. I have friends that are looking at things that are going on, from the perspective of a different race or culture or whatever. And I can reach out to them and say, hey, what does this look like to you? And I just sort of have that feeling that there's answers to these things. So it's been hugely helpful.
Yeah, I mean, it
Yeah.
definitely sounds like it. Definitely sounds like it. So I guess let me ask you, when there are things that are sort of, I guess, how would you suggest with sort of from a Braver Angels framework, that sort of people deal with things that they might feel they have, fundamental differences around, if
Mhm.
you will, that for whatever reason they don't feel that there is a compromise. I mean, you brought
Sure.
up abortion earlier, and I'm
Yeah.
I definitely got to find that one on YouTube. But and obviously that can be something that can be extremely divisive.
Yeah.
How I mean, is the goal less of obviously in less in that instance, less of well, let's try to compromise around this versus let's discuss this and arrive at a if we're going to sort of disagree or fight about this, so to speak,
Yeah.
we're doing it in a way that we can still come out at the end of the day where everybody's kind of okay with each other.
Well, okay, so here's the thing. We're not trying to change people's minds in terms of their values and their issues and what they believe, right? The goal of Braver Angels is not about kind of making everyone into moderates or making everyone come to
Right.
compromise solutions about things. And it's part of why we do engage those really difficult issues. I mean, we really do confront the most difficult issues. But what the goal is that we have is not, how do I say this? It's not about the what, it's about the why. So what if I'm engaged in like a Braver Angels debate with someone and we're very different on a fundamental issue, it's very valuable for me to understand why the other person believes what they believe. I may jump to conclusions about why they believe it that just frustrate me because there's no way I can break through if I think, well, that they're an immovable force. Knowing where someone else is coming from at least makes it easier to communicate with them. That said, this is not a substitution for all of the other ways that we're engaged politically, right?
Right.
This is a tool. This is a way to try to take political gains and make them more lasting. It's try to change hearts and minds, right? Vote and get involved in politics and do all the things that people normally do. Like this isn't to denigrate any of those other ways that people try to achieve political victories. And sometimes that's what you've got to do. We're really only talking about the demonization of the other side, the assuming that other people's motives are different than what they probably are. We're really helping people open that window to see that, that actually the reason that the other person opposes me is not because they're stupid or evil. right? That there's other reasons, and that if I can understand those reasons, maybe there's something we can do about it. Maybe there's common ground. And even if there isn't common ground on an issue, maybe there's common ground on a value. You know, I think about this kind of like, you know, we have to build a future together, right? We're not all going to get everything we want in that future, but there's common goods, right?
Right.
If you really understand what's truly important to a person, it gives you a better negotiating position than just assuming, well, they're against this and I'm for this, so they're not going to get this. Because if that's your orientation and all you do is just butt heads with them and then beat them, it's not like they die or go away or you vanquish them.
Right.
You know, you just won this round. What's going to happen? You know, let's say we got together, we did a big thing, we won an election. Awesome. It doesn't make the other side join your side. You know, it makes them plot for how they're going to take over, and then they're going to push back and all of that. So we win these things that are very, very temporary. But if you know why somebody's motivated and why they're going for something, maybe you can address the underlying issue. And real change, like real social change, long-lasting change, that's the characteristic of those things. So it's when you realize the other person isn't the other, right? So if you look at important gains that were made in the civil rights movement or in the gay rights movement or in other movements that are identity based, really where it's a lasting change is when the other side realizes, oh, we have these values in common. Like we're not completely different, like just opposing forces. No, actually, you care about marriage and your family, so do I. You care about your rights and your freedoms, well, so do I. You have these common values, well, so do I. And then we can work together. So the goal is that it's the hearts and minds element. On any particular issue, we may have to fight tooth and nail for it.
Right.
But at least we're fighting for the right reason. You know, we're not fighting a ghost. We're fighting a difference, which is many times a difference in people's beliefs about the best way to accomplish a goal. We all care about economic opportunity, but there's very divergent views on how to do that.
Right.
So it's not like one side wants opportunity, the other side wants, I don't know, whatever the opposite of opportunity is. It's but you can at least have a basis for communicating and negotiating with that.
I was gonna say, Will, are you sure you've never done media before, man? You're pretty spot. Yeah, I mean, you're pretty fluid and eloquent here.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
How well?
I'm opinionated. Maybe that helps.
Fair enough. I don't. That being said, I know that you know, as you said, right? I mean, there most of the time, right? We're you know, we share similar people of different stripes, right? Share similar values and have common values and common principles. We obviously do live in a time period of extremity, you know, at both the left and right. How do you think, you know, we can maybe douse some of that, if you will, right? Where it's whether it's you know, a white supremacist who believes in, you know, white supremacy, or let's say, I don't know, a black supremacist who believes in black supremacy or what have you, where there is no value alignment.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, to be really honest, I mean, there's a certain point at which this stuff doesn't work, and that point is where if one person really doesn't recognize the other person's inherent value to be in the conversation with them, I don't know how you have a meaningful conversation with them. I will say that the actual number of people who seem to hold those extreme beliefs is much less than they seem to be. It does not seem, I mean, their voice is so much louder because of the divisions in our country and the way that media is working and all of that.
Right.
We really amplify those voices. Way beyond their actual number and way beyond their actual relevance. The most important thing, I would think, is to just make them irrelevant. Like people that have goofball, you know, ideas like that are, you know, they're really distasteful and really are antisocial, just need to be not part of the social conversation. and the thing is, when we think that 50% of Americans are a projection of that very small percentage, that's where we really go wrong. So really what Brave Angels is more about helping people understand that although there's this tiny fraction of people on one extreme side of politics, that in no way represents the vast majority of people on the other side.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, when we get together and talk about, so one of the things we do in the Red Blue workshop is a thing called the stereotyping exercise. Each side looks at the stereotype that exists of their side and says, okay, here's the true story. Like here, let's set the record straight. This is the way it really is. But here's the kernel of truth, right? You actually want people to look at their side and distance themselves from people that aren't representative of them. So I can say, like, if somebody comes to me and they're a conservative, they can say, yeah, there's some racist skinhead types that identify as conservative, but that sure as hell isn't me. I'm distancing myself from that. So I think it's important to marginalize them, those margins. But that's not real. I would say that's kind of out of the scope of what Brave Angels is there to do, because we're not really here for people who aren't going to at least make an effort to recognize the common humanity of people that are different than them.
Right.
And so, yeah, we can't reach everybody, but we can reach a lot of people. Let's say that.
Right. Oh, and that's what I guess I wanted to ask you too, is do you see, how Steven Pinker, actually you made me think of something Steven Pinker said about how we're actually living in a, one of the most sort of peaceful, better
Mhm.
times of humanity, and yet you would never know it because of the, the constant, bombardment
Yeah.
of news and so forth.
Yeah,
Um,
I read one of his books, and I remember that, like poverty, global poverty, and
right.
like racial attitudes. I mean, all of these ways in which we think are just getting worse and out of control, violence, crime, all this stuff. Yeah, really on the decline, but we would never know it
Right.
because, you know.
So is there almost a part of you that believes that a braver angels in some ways is actually more representative of what people um, truly want to do versus sort of what many times is paraded around in
Yeah,
our media channels?
absolutely. I think that's absolutely true. I think that the perspective of seeing common humanity in everyone that's involved in these conversations, seeing that basically everybody is trying to do what they think is good, seeing that people are basically open to the idea of understanding on the other side, um, that I think that is the reality. I think that we live in this kind of funhouse projection of those differences. And you earlier asked me the question about where's the relief, and the relief is in realizing that, wow, okay, I thought I was the weird one. I thought I was the one that was like, I don't want to throw a brick through someone else's car window. That's not who I want to be. I want
Right.
to engage with them. Um, and then you realize that really most people on both sides are like that. And when you realize that those people that are willing to risk, their own, I don't know, embarrassment, their own, sense of security and safety and comfort to reach across and communicate with somebody else in an uncomfortable way about an uncomfortable issue, that is the normal, then you start realizing, oh, what the hell am I worried about?
Right.
Like, the issues don't go away, the political fights don't go away, the things that we need to accomplish don't go away. But I have like way more help than I thought. You know, I'm not just an isolated person in an isolated side in a country that doesn't care. You know, it's just that we're divided in these weird little bubbles where we get a weird perception of the world, and we think that we're all in battle, like we're all, oh
Right.
god, we're just beaten up on by the world. And so of course when we go out in the world, we do it, attacking,
Right.
because when you're afraid, you attack. So when you look around, you're like, well, everyone's attacking all the time. Well, yeah, because everyone's afraid.
Right.
you know but if
Right.
we work together, we can it's it's yeah, so I mean, I think there's real opportunity there, but I think you're right, it's much more representative.
Yeah. I'll say that's probably the most hopeful interview I've had in quite some time.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it.
um, yeah, it was. I'm a fan of Ryan Holiday. He does the Daily Stoic, and he talked about how,
Mhm.
quote unquote, reading the news is for him at least like reading like Seneca and Marcus Aurelius or whatever,
Mhm.
because he's just ultimately reading sort of the continued uh, uh, consistent truths about the human condition, right? And that tells you more many times than the latest whatever gossip, if you will. Yeah, and I have your email, obviously. The only other thing is, do you want to be, in terms of how you like to be identified in this piece? Is it are, yeah, where do you currently live? Can it
I
say?
live in Bremerton,
Ah,
Bremerton,
okay.
Washington.
Haven't been there in a while because of the the lockdown.
Yeah,
Um,
you don't ride the boat now with COVID?
no,
Yeah.
not so much.
Yeah.
I should have asked you actually this at the beginning, but we just got into it and it was so great.
Sure.
Do you identify more on the blue or the red side?
Well, as I'm speaking as the Washington State coordinator, let me not identify.
Okay, okay,
Yeah,
awesome.
probably easier. I definitely am on
No,
one.
yeah, I will. That would be even
I'll
better, I think. To be honest with you. And also if because I know that there are some living in Seattle, there are certainly more than the blue red paradigm, if you will. If there were folks who were, I don't know, they identified more as libertarian or
Yep.
socialist and so forth, they would obviously, I'm assuming that they would still be welcome.
They're very welcome. Yeah, absolutely. It's really important to have every voice at the table. And I mean that in every way that society differs and that you've got diversity in society about opinions and about people's backgrounds and everything else. Every voice has to be at the table or the conversation is less meaningful. So we really do want to invite people in. It's true, Braver Angels does tend to have like a red-blue balance. Like people will tend to pick the one that they seem closest to. But so someone might say, well, I'm a libertarian, but maybe a left libertarian or maybe a right libertarian or a socialist. I'm more this way than that way. But everyone's voice remains their voice. And that's a really cool part of this. Like, it's not by signing up and saying, oh, well, okay, socialist, but I'm on the blue. That doesn't mean that like I have to agree with everything that comes out of the Democratic Party. That person still in every conversation is representing their views and their values. We're really just trying to balance the involvement so that we know that it's not overwhelmingly on one side or the other of politics and the division line.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
so yeah, I was going to give you another quote.
Yeah, please. Yeah, yeah. I just want to be respectful of your time. So yeah, so feel
sure,
free.
no worries. Earlier we talked about kind of what why people are polarized and all of that, or like why what sort of people can do. And I there's a really good thing that early on I heard from Bill Doherty that I really liked, and he said that people aren't polarized because there's something wrong with them. Like, Brave Angels isn't out trying to cure people or show them they're not we're not trying to fix something that's wrong with people. People are polarized because they give a damn about something, and they're frustrated and they don't know how else to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. So if you really think about it, it's not that we're trying to take some way that people are and say you need to be a different way. It's that people already are trying to make a difference in the world, and we're giving them a tool that they didn't have before. And if you see it through that lens, I think it really is helpful for understanding why we're doing what we're doing, and also the limits of what we're doing. So like the talk that we had earlier about, whether you can get people that are, skinheads or something involved. Well, no, I mean, probably not. But, but most people really are fighting for what they think is right. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to give them another way to do that.